I want this human. Mother, the alien vampire princess, chose the warrior part 1. The stars had always seemed peaceful to humanity. For thousands of years, people looked up at the night sky and dreamed of what might be out there. They imagined friendly visitors, advanced civilizations, and perhaps even answers to the great questions of existence. But the universe does not care about human dreams. The universe is cold, vast, and filled with things that see humanity as nothing more than food. The Velthrani Empire had existed for over 50,000 years. They were beautiful in a terrifying way. Tall, elegant beings with skin that seemed to glow like moonlight. Their eyes were deep purple, almost black, and their smiles revealed elongated teeth designed for one purpose. They fed on the life essence of other species. Not just blood, but something deeper. The energy that made living things alive. They had harvested dozens of worlds across the galaxy, treating other intelligent species the way humans treated cattle. Empress Seraphiel sat on her throne aboard the flagship of the Harvest Fleet. She was ancient beyond human understanding, having ruled her empire for 3,000 years. Her face showed no age, no weakness, only cold perfection. Around her stood her court, nobles and generals who had helped conquer countless worlds. Today was special. Her daughter, Princess Lizara, stood beside her for the first time during a harvest. Lizara was young by Velthrani standards, only 400 years old. She had her mother's beauty, but something else in her eyes. A curiosity that the Empress found both amusing and slightly concerning. "Watch carefully, my daughter," the Empress said, her voice like silk over ice. "This is your birthright. This is what our family has done since the beginning of our empire." Lizara nodded, but her attention was on the view screen showing the blue and green planet ahead. Earth. The Velthrani Scouts had discovered it decades ago. They had watched and waited, studied the humans, and determined that they were perfect for harvesting. Billions of beings, rich with life essence and technologically primitive compared to the Empire. "They're fighting back," one of the generals reported, a hint of amusement in his voice. "They have sent ships to intercept us." The Empress waved her hand dismissively. "Let them come. It changes nothing." On the human side, Commander Park Junho gripped the arms of his captain's chair as his ship shook from another impact. He was 42 years old, a veteran of conflicts on Earth and the small skirmishes humanity had fought in space. His face was weathered, marked by a scar across his left cheek from a mission that had gone wrong years ago. He had survived things that should have ended him. His crew believed he was either blessed or too stubborn to die. "Shields at 30%, his first officer reported, her voice strained but steady. "2 more ships destroyed." "Commander, we cannot win this." Junho knew she was right. The alien vessels were massive, their weapons beyond anything humanity had developed. Earth's entire defense fleet was being torn apart like paper in a storm. But running was not an option. Behind them was Earth. Behind them were 8 billion people who had no idea what was coming for them. "All ships, maintain formation," Junho ordered through the fleet communication channel. "We hold the line as long as we can. Every minute we buy is another minute for evacuation on the surface." It was a lie, and everyone knew it. There would be no meaningful evacuation. Where would people go? But the lie gave purpose. It gave something to fight for. The battle lasted less than 2 hours. One by one, human ships were destroyed. Junho watched friends and colleagues die on his view screen, their vessels exploding into silence. When his own ship finally took the fatal hit, he felt almost relieved. At least it was over. At least he had done everything he could. The explosion threw him across the bridge. He felt bones break, felt the burning heat, and then the cold as he was sucked into the vacuum of space. His emergency suit activated automatically, sealing around him, giving him perhaps an hour of air. He floated among the debris of humanity's last stand, surrounded by the wreckage of ships and the bodies of his crew. His suit systems were damaged but still functional. Almost by instinct, he activated his personal beacon. Then, without really thinking about why, he turned on his music player. Classical music filled his helmet. A piano concerto his mother had loved when he was a child. If he was going to die among the stars, he wanted to hear something beautiful. Aboard the Velthrani flagship, Princess Lizara watched the aftermath of the battle with a strange feeling in her chest. She had expected to feel triumph, or at least satisfaction. Instead, she felt empty. These humans had fought, knowing they could not win. They had thrown themselves against an unstoppable force with nothing but courage and desperation. Why? What was the point of such futile resistance? Your Highness, a technician approached her respectfully. We have detected a survivor among the debris. One human, still alive in an emergency suit. Lizara's eyes widened slightly. Show me. The view screen focused on a small figure floating in the wreckage. The data readout showed his vital signs, weak but stable. And there was something else. Audio, music. What is that sound? Lizara asked. Unknown, Your Highness. The human appears to be broadcasting some form of art, sound patterns with mathematical structure. We believe they call it music. Lizara listened. The piano notes were unlike anything in Velthrani culture. Sad and beautiful and somehow hopeful all at once. This creature, dying alone in the cold darkness of space, was listening to music. Not screaming, not begging, not cursing. Just floating there with his strange sounds, waiting for the end. Bring him aboard, Lizara commanded. The technician hesitated. Your Highness, protocol dictates that survivors be eliminated. They are livestock. We do not waste resources on individual specimens. I am giving you a command, Lizara said, her voice carrying the weight of royal authority. Bring him to me. I wish to understand this species better before we harvest them. It was a reasonable excuse. She was not sure it was the real reason. But something about that music, about a dying creature choosing beauty in his final moments, demanded answers. She needed to understand what kind of beings these humans truly were. As the recovery vessel moved toward the floating figure, Lizara did not know that this single decision would change everything. Not just for her, not just for the human, but for two entire civilizations. The warrior was coming aboard. And nothing would ever be the same. End of part 1. I want this human mother. The alien vampire princess chose the warrior. Part 2. Park Junho woke up in a cell. That surprised him more than anything else. He had expected to wake up dead, if that made any sense. The last thing he remembered was floating in space, listening to music, waiting for his air to run out. Now he was lying on a cold floor, his body aching everywhere, but somehow alive. The cell was strange. The walls seemed to pulse with a soft purple light. There were no bars, no visible door, just smooth surfaces that hummed with energy. He sat up slowly, testing his limbs. His ribs were cracked, probably. His left arm was stiff and painful. But he could move. He could think. For now, that was enough. He had been captured by the aliens. That much was obvious. The question was why. From what he had seen during the battle, these creatures did not seem like the type to take prisoners. They had destroyed the human fleet without hesitation, without mercy. So why was he still breathing? The answer came 3 hours later when the wall shimmered and 2 guards entered. They were Velthrani, tall and pale with those unsettling purple eyes. They wore armor that looked like it was grown rather than built, organic and flowing. They carried weapons that Junho could not identify, but he understood their purpose well enough. Human, one of them spoke, the word dripping with contempt. You will stand. Junho stood. Not because he was afraid, but because there was no point in resistance. Not yet. He needed information. He needed to understand his situation before he could do anything about it. You are livestock, the guard continued. You exist to feed the Empire. You should feel honored that your essence will nourish those far greater than yourself. Junho looked at the guard for a long moment. Then, despite everything, despite the pain and the fear and the knowledge of what these creatures had done to his people, he smiled. Nice teeth, he said. Do you floss, or is that natural? The guard's expression shifted from contempt to confusion. This was not the reaction he expected. Livestock begged. Livestock screamed. They did not make jokes. You do not seem to understand your situation, human. I understand perfectly, Junho replied, keeping his voice calm. I am going to die. You are going to kill me and probably everyone I have ever known. But I have been almost dead before. Many times. And I have learned something important. Fear is a choice. I choose not to give you that satisfaction. Before the guard could respond, another figure entered the cell. The guards immediately stepped aside, bowing their heads in respect. Princess Lysara walked past them without acknowledgement. Her attention fixed entirely on the human. Jun-Ho had seen beautiful things in his life. Sunsets over the ocean. Snow falling on mountain peaks. His daughter's face the day she was born. But he had never seen anything quite like this creature. She was terrifying and magnificent at the same time, like a storm or a fire. Something that could destroy you while you stood there admiring it. Leave us, Lysara commanded the guards. They hesitated, glancing at each other. Now, the guards left. The wall sealed behind them. Junho and the princess stood facing each other in the purple light. You were listening to music, Lysara said. It was not a question. While you were dying, alone in space, you chose to spend your final moments listening to sounds. It was a piano concerto, Junho said, by a composer named Chopin. He died young, sick, far from home. But he created something that still makes people feel things 200 years later. I thought if I was going to die, I wanted to feel something beautiful. Lysara studied him like he was a puzzle she could not solve. Your species confuses me. You are weak. Your bodies are fragile. Your technology primitive. Your lifespans pathetically short. Yet you fought us. You knew you could not win, but you fought anyway. Why? Because some things matter more than winning, Junho said simply. Behind us was our home, our families, our children. If we ran, we would have lived a little longer. But we would have stopped being human. Explain. Junho thought for a moment, searching for words that could bridge the gap between their worlds. Humans are strange. We know we are going to die. Every single one of us, from the moment we are born, knows that our time is limited. And instead of making us give up, that knowledge makes us fight harder. It makes us love deeper. It makes us create music and art and stories. Because if everything ends, then every moment matters. Every choice matters. Every stand we take against the darkness matters. Lysara moved closer. She was taller than him by nearly a head, and up close, he could see flecks of silver in her purple eyes. I wish to understand you better. Your essence. Before he could react, she took his hand and raised his wrist to her lips. Her teeth pierced his skin, just slightly, and he felt a strange pulling sensation. Not painful exactly, but deep, like she was touching something inside him that had no physical form. Lysara's eyes widened. She released his wrist and stepped back, her composure cracking for the first time. Something had shaken her. What is that? She whispered. That fire inside you. That burning. It is like nothing I have ever tasted. I do not know what you mean. Your essence. It is not just life energy. It is will. Pure, concentrated will. Your species, you burn with purpose. Every cell in your body is fighting to survive, to matter, to leave some mark on the universe before you disappear. How do you live like that? How do you carry that fire without it destroying you? Junho shrugged, though his wrist still tingled where she had tasted him. We do not know any other way. That fire is what makes us human. Lysara was silent for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was different, softer, almost vulnerable. I have lived for 400 years. I have seen wonders across the galaxy. I have tasted the essence of 100 species. And I have never felt anything like what burns inside you. She met his eyes. I want to understand. I want to know what it means to be human. Then talk to me, Junho said. Not as a predator to prey. Not as a princess to livestock. Just talk to me. Ask me anything. And so she did. Through the night cycle and into the next day, Lysara returned again and again to his cell. They talked about Earth, about humanity's history, and dreams and failures and hopes. He told her about war and peace, about love and loss, about the way humans kept getting up no matter how many times they were knocked down. With each conversation, something changed between them. He saw the curiosity in her eyes grow into something else, something deeper. And he began to see past her alien nature to the person underneath. She was lonely, he realized. Surrounded by an empire of predators, she had never met anyone who saw the universe the way she secretly did, who wondered about things beyond feeding and conquering. By the third day, Lysara made her decision. She would go to her mother. She would make a request that would shake the foundations of the Velthrani Empire. She wanted this human. Not as food. Not as a servant. As something the Empire had not seen in 10,000 years. End of part 2. I want this human. Mother, the alien vampire princess, chose the warrior. Part 3. The throne room of the Velthrani flagship was designed to make visitors feel small. The ceiling rose so high it disappeared into shadow. The walls were lined with trophies from conquered worlds, artifacts and symbols of species that no longer existed. At the far end, on a throne carved from what looked like black crystal, sat Empress Seraphiel. Princess Lysara walked the long path to her mother's throne. Every step felt heavier than the last. Around her, the nobles of the court watched with hungry interest. News traveled fast on a Velthrani ship, and everyone knew that the princess had been spending time with a human prisoner. Tongues were wagging. Rumors were spreading. Sarah stopped at the proper distance from the throne and bowed her head. Mother, I request an audience. The Empress regarded her daughter with unreadable eyes. You have been visiting the human. Multiple times, alone. Yes, Mother. Explain yourself. Lysara raised her head. This was the moment. There was no going back after this. I have come to make a formal request, in accordance with the ancient laws of our house. The court fell completely silent. The ancient laws were rarely invoked. They carried weight that even the Empress could not easily dismiss. Speak your request. I invoke the right of covenant companion. I wish to bond with the human called Park Junho. The silence shattered into chaos. Nobles shouted in outrage. Guards shifted uncomfortably. Even the Empress sat forward on her throne, her composure cracking just slightly. You cannot be serious, one of the elder nobles spat. A covenant companion? With livestock? This is an insult to 10,000 years of tradition. The tradition does not specify species, Lysara replied, keeping her voice steady even as her heart raced. A covenant companion is chosen based on worth, not origin. I have found worth in this human. Worth? The noble's voice dripped with disgust. What worth can an animal have? He has worth because he is not an animal. Lysara turned to address the entire court. I have tasted his essence. It burned with something I have never encountered in any species. We have harvested willpower, purpose, a fire that drives him to face death without fear. If we are so superior to humans, why did they fight us knowing they would lose? Why did this one face our guards with jokes instead of begging? We call them primitive, but perhaps we have missed something. Perhaps there is more to the universe than predator and prey. The Empress raised her hand, and the court fell silent immediately. She stood from her throne and descended the steps slowly, her gaze fixed on her daughter. You are young, Lysara, passionate. These qualities can be strengths, but they can also be weaknesses that lead to foolish decisions. She stopped directly in front of her daughter. I will see this human myself. I will determine his worth. Junho was brought to the throne room in chains. The guard shoved him forward until he stood between Lysara and the Empress. He looked around at the gathered Velthrani, at the trophies on the walls, at the sheer alien majesty of his surroundings. Then he straightened his spine and waited. The Empress circled him slowly, examining him like a farmer might examine livestock at market. So, this is the creature that has captured my daughter's interest. You seem unremarkable to me. Small, damaged, fragile. I get that a lot, Junho said. Several gods moved forward, ready to punish the disrespect, but the Empress waved them back. You speak to me as if we are equals. We are not. I have conquered worlds. I have extinguished species. I have lived longer than your entire civilization has existed. You are nothing. Then why am I still alive? The question hung in the air. The Empress's eyes narrowed. Because my daughter has asked for you. A request I find puzzling. What is it about you that she sees? I do not know, Your Majesty. I am just a soldier. I fight for my people. I protect those who cannot protect themselves. I stand up when it would be easier to stay down. There is nothing special about me. Any human would do the same. That is precisely what makes you special, Lysara said quietly. The Empress ignored her daughter and leaned close to Junho. Her presence was overwhelming, ancient and cold and hungry. Let me show you something, human. Let me show you what you truly are. She placed her hand on his forehead, and suddenly Junho was somewhere else. He was standing in darkness, surrounded by visions of horror. He saw Earth burning. He saw his family dying. He saw himself failing, falling, breaking. Every fear he had ever hidden in the deepest part of his heart was dragged into the light and amplified 1,000 times. The mental assault lasted only seconds, but it felt like years. When the Empress finally released him, Junho fell to his knees, gasping for breath. His body shook. His eyes were wet. There, the Empress said with satisfaction. That is what you are. Beneath all your brave words, you are just a frightened animal. You fear death. You fear failure. You fear losing everyone you love. You are nothing. Junho stayed on his knees for a long moment. The court watched, waiting for him to break completely, waiting for him to beg. Instead, he laughed. It was not a loud laugh, not a defiant shout. Just a quiet chuckle that built slowly until he could catch his breath. You think showing me my fears proves I am weak? He pushed himself to his feet, unsteady but standing. Every human carries those fears. Every single day. We fear death, yes. We fear losing the people we love. We fear failing the ones who depend on us. But we do not let those fears stop us. We carry them with us and keep walking anyway. That is not weakness, Your Majesty. That is the definition of courage. He met the Empress's eyes directly. My people do not kneel to monsters. We fight them. We die fighting them if we must. But we do not kneel. So if you want me to beg, you will be waiting a very long time. The throne room was absolutely silent. No one breathed. Even Lysara stared at the human with something like awe. The Empress studied Junho for a long moment. Then, slowly, a thin smile crossed her ancient face. Interesting. Very interesting. She turned to address the court. My daughter has invoked the ancient right of covenant companion. I cannot dismiss such a request without cause. Therefore, I will allow a test. The human will face the trial of crimson. If he survives, he will have proven his worth. If he dies, the harvest of earth will proceed as planned. Lysara stepped forward. Mother, the trial of crimson is designed for Velthrani warriors. No other species has ever survived it. Then your human will have the opportunity to be the first. The Empress looked at Junho. Do you accept the challenge? Junho did not hesitate. He knew what was at stake. Not just his life, but his world. His people. Everything. I accept. The Empress nodded. Then it is decided. In 3 days, you will face the trial of crimson on Velthros Prime. May whatever gods humans worship have mercy on you, because the trial will not. As the guards led him away, Junho caught Lysara's eye. She looked terrified. She looked guilty. She looked like someone who had just realized her choice might cost this human everything. He smiled at her. A small, reassuring smile. Then he was gone, and the countdown to the trial of crimson had begun. End of part 3. I want this human. Mother. The alien vampire princess chose the warrior part 4. Velthros Prime was a world built for one purpose. Death as entertainment. The entire planet had been transformed over thousands of years into a massive arena complex, with stadiums that could hold millions of spectators. The Velthrani came here to watch lesser species prove their worth or, more commonly, to watch them die in spectacular fashion. Park Junho stood in the preparation chamber beneath the main arena. Through the walls, he could hear the roar of the crowd above. Thousands upon thousands of Velthrani, all gathered to watch a single human face impossible odds. He had been given no weapons, no armor. Just simple clothing and his own 2 hands. A guard entered and threw a small bundle at his feet. You are permitted 1 personal item for the trial. Choose something from your belongings. Junho knelt and opened the bundle. Inside were the few things recovered from his emergency suit, his identification tags, a small photograph of his daughter, only 8 years old, smiling at the camera on her birthday, and his music player, somehow still functional despite everything. He picked up the photograph, looked at it for a long moment, then tucked it into his pocket close to his heart. Then he put the music player in his other pocket. If he was going to die today, he would die with the 2 things that mattered most to him: his family and his humanity. The trial consists of 5 rounds, the guard explained, clearly bored. In each round, you will face a champion from a conquered world. Survive all 5, and you pass the trial. No species has ever survived past the 3rd round. There is a first time for everything, Junho said quietly. The gates opened, and he walked into the arena. The light was blinding at first. The stadium was enormous, the crowd a sea of pale faces and purple eyes stretching as far as he could see. The noise was overwhelming, a mix of cheering and mocking laughter. To them, this was comedy. A tiny human about to be torn apart for their amusement. Junho looked up to the royal box, where Empress Seraphile sat watching with cold interest. Beside her, Princess Lysara gripped the railing so hard her knuckles had turned white. Their eyes met across the vast distance, and he gave her a small nod. Then he turned to face the arena. The first opponent emerged from the opposite gate. It was a creature called a Scorth, according to the announcer. 8 feet tall, covered in thick scales that served as natural armor, with 4 arms ending in razor-sharp claws. Its world had been harvested 50 years ago, and this one had been kept as a gladiator ever since. The Scorth charged without warning. Junho dove to the side, barely avoiding the swipe that would have taken his head off. He rolled, came up running, and immediately realized the terrible truth. He could not hurt this creature. Its hide was too thick. Its claws were too fast. Every advantage belonged to his opponent Dodd, so he did the only thing he could. He survived. He dodged. He ran. He used every bit of the arena environment to stay alive, rolling under swipes, leaping over obstacles, never staying in one place long enough to be caught. The crowd grew confused, then annoyed. This was not entertainment. This was a human running like a scared animal. But Junho was not running from fear. He was running with purpose, watching, learning, studying his opponent. The Scorth was fast in short bursts, but tired quickly. It relied on overwhelming power rather than strategy, and it had a habit of overextending on its attacks, leaving itself off balance for just a fraction of a second. On the Scorth's next charge, Junho did not dodge. He stepped inside the attack, ducked under the swinging claws, and drove his elbow directly into the joint of the creature's front right arm. The same joint he had noticed was slightly different colored, slightly weaker than the rest. The Scorth screamed. Its arm hung limp. And in that moment of shock, Junho grabbed a loose stone from the arena floor and drove it into the creature's eye. The Scorth fell. It was not dead, but it could no longer fight. The crowd fell silent in disbelief. Round 1 to the human. The second opponent was faster. A creature that moved like liquid, all speed and agility. Junho took damage this time. Cuts across his arms and chest. A gash on his forehead that sent blood streaming into his eyes. But he learned its patterns, predicted its movements, and eventually trapped it against the arena wall where its speed meant nothing. Round 2 to the human. The third opponent was unlike anything he had faced. A psychic creature that attacked his mind rather than his body. Junho fell to his knees, overwhelmed by waves of fear and despair and hopelessness. The same fears the Empress had shown him, amplified and weaponized. In the royal box, Lysara half rose from her seat. He cannot survive this. No one can resist a Mendreaver. But down in the arena, something strange was happening. Junho was not breaking. He was trembling, sweating, clearly in agony. But he was not breaking. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the photograph of his daughter. He stared at that small face, that innocent smile, and he remembered why he was fighting, not for himself, not for glory, for her. For every child on Earth who deserved to grow up without knowing that monsters existed in the stars. The psychic attack slid off his mind like water off stone. The love he felt for his daughter was stronger than any fear the creature could manufacture. He stood up, walked toward the Mendreaver, and ended the fight with his bare hands. Round 3 to the human. The crowd was no longer laughing. They watched in stunned silence as this small, bleeding, broken creature refused to fall. Refused to give up. Refused to be what they expected. The fourth round nearly killed him. A brute of a creature that he could not outthink or outmaneuver. It caught him, threw him against the arena wall, and stood over him ready to deliver the final blow. But Junho grabbed a handful of sand and threw it into the creature's eyes, blinding it long enough to find a weapon, a broken piece of the arena barrier, and drove it home. He was badly injured now, ribs broken, left arm hanging useless at his side, vision blurring from blood loss. But he was still standing. Then the gates opened for the final round, and his heart sank. The creature that emerged was called a Goroth. It was a nightmare given physical form. 12 feet tall, built like a living tank, with hide so thick that nothing in the arena could pierce it. Even the Velthrani feared the Goroth. They were considered the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. "This is the end," someone in the crowd whispered. "Not even he can survive this." Junho looked at the Goroth. He looked at his broken body. He calculated his options and realized there were none. He could not hurt this creature. He could not outrun it. He could not outsmart it. But he could choose how he died. The Gorath charged. Junho charged to meet it. At the last second, instead of trying to dodge, he threw himself directly at the creature's mouth. Its massive jaws closed around his torso. The pain was unimaginable, but that was exactly what he wanted Dot in that moment of contact. Junho drove the sharpest piece of arena stone he had been hiding directly through the roof of the Gorath's mouth, up through its skull, into its brain. The creature's eyes went wide. It shuddered. And then it fell, taking Junho with it. For a long moment, nothing moved. The entire arena held its breath. Then Junho crawled out from under the dead creature, covered in blood, both his own and the monster's, and somehow, impossibly, stood up. The silence lasted 3 heartbeats. Then one Velthrani in the crowd began to applaud. Then another. Then 100. Then 1,000. The stadium erupted in cheering, unlike anything it had heard in centuries. Not mocking laughter, but genuine admiration. In the royal box, Princess Lysara was weeping openly. The Empress sat frozen, her ancient face showing an emotion she had not felt in a very long time. Down in the arena, Par Junho looked up at the cheering crowd, at the princess who had believed in him, at the sky filled with unfamiliar stars. Then his legs gave out, and everything went dark. He had survived the trial of Crimson. Against all odds, the human had won. End of Part 4. I want this human. Mother, the alien vampire princess, chose the warrior. Part 5. Park. Junho drifted in and out of consciousness for what felt like an eternity. Sometimes he was aware of lights, voices, the sensation of being moved. Sometimes he dreamed of Earth, of his daughter running through a field of flowers, of his mother playing piano in their small apartment. Sometimes he dreamed of nothing at all. When he finally opened his eyes and stayed awake, he found himself in a room unlike any he had seen before. The walls glowed with soft blue light. The bed beneath him was impossibly comfortable, molding itself to his body in ways that felt almost alive. And sitting beside him, watching him with exhausted eyes, was Princess Lysara. "You are awake," she said, her voice thick with relief. "I was beginning to think you would sleep forever. How long?" His voice came out as a croak. 8 days. Your injuries were severe. The medical staff said any normal being would have died. But apparently, you are not normal. Junho tried to laugh but winced at the pain in his ribs. So I survived. You did more than survive. You became a legend. Lysara stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. The story of the human who conquered the trial of Crimson has spread across the empire. Species we have harvested for centuries are whispering about you, wondering if they judged humanity too quickly. And your mother? The harvest of Earth? Lysara turned to face him. Postponed, indefinitely. You have earned that much. But there is still the matter of the covenant ceremony. If we complete the bond, Earth will be protected for a full century, and you will formally become my companion. Junho was quiet for a moment. He understood what she was not saying. The covenant was permanent. It would tie him to her, to the Empire, forever. He could never return to Earth as a normal citizen. He would be bound to this world, to this princess, for the rest of his life. Tell me about the ceremony, he said finally. Lysara sat on the edge of his bed. It is ancient, sacred. We exchange blood and essence, creating a bond that cannot be broken. I will feel what you feel. You will feel what I feel. In a very real sense, we will become part of each other. And if I refuse, then the protection I can offer Earth is limited. Other factions in the Empire will challenge my mother's decision. They will demand the harvest continue. She looked down at her hands. I will not force you. This must be your choice. But I want you to know that my reasons for wanting this have changed since I first saw you floating in space. What do you mean? Lasara met his eyes. There was vulnerability there that he had never expected to see from a being who had lived for centuries. When I first asked for you, I was curious. You were a puzzle I wanted to solve. But now, she hesitated. Now I do not want to solve you. I want to understand you. I want to stand beside you. I want to learn what it means to burn with purpose the way you do. I have lived 400 years, and I have never met anyone who made me feel the way you do. And what way is that? Alive, she whispered. Truly alive. For the first time, Junho reached out and took her hand. It was cool to the touch, but not unpleasant. In my culture, when two people care about each other, they do not start with grand ceremonies. They start with small things. Shared meals. Long conversations. Getting to know each other not as symbols, but as people. We have had long conversations, Lasara pointed out. We have. And I have seen who you really are beneath the princess, beneath the alien, beneath everything your empire expects you to be. I have seen someone who is lonely. Someone who is kind. Someone who looks at the universe and wonders about the same things I wonder about. He squeezed her hand gently. I will complete the covenant with you. Not because I want to save Earth, although I do. Not because I feel obligated, although I understand the stakes. I will complete it because I have come to care about you, Lasara. In all the universe, across all the species and worlds and possibilities, we found each other. That means something. Lasara's eyes glistened with tears that she refused to let fall. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you taste blood to understand people, but you have never used that ability to hurt anyone. I know you have lived for centuries surrounded by predators, but you have never become one. I know that when you look at me, you see something more than food or a curiosity or a novelty. He smiled. I know that you are scared right now, just like I am. And we are going to do this anyway. The covenant ceremony took place 3 days later, when Junho was strong enough to stand. It was held in an ancient chamber on Velthor's Prime, a place so old that even the Velthrani had forgotten who built it. The walls were carved with symbols in a language no one could read. The air hummed with power that felt older than the stars. Only a handful of witnesses were permitted. The Empress, a few trusted nobles, and the bonding itself was intimate, almost private. Lasara and Junho stood facing each other in the center of the chamber. She wore ceremonial robes of deep purple. He wore simple white, a deliberate choice that contrasted with everything around him. The bond requires blood, Lasara explained softly. We each make a small cut and press them together. The essence flows between us, creating a connection that will last until one of us dies. I understand. She produced a small blade, ancient and beautifully crafted. She cut her palm first, then offered the blade to him. He took it without hesitation and cut his own palm. They pressed their hands together. The sensation was unlike anything Junho had ever experienced. He could feel her suddenly, not just as a presence beside him, but as a part of himself. Her emotions flowed into him, fear and hope, and something that took him a moment to recognize his love. And he knew she could feel the same from him. For a moment, they were not two beings, but one. All barriers gone. All secrets revealed. Complete and total understanding dawned when they finally separated. Both of them were trembling. It is done, Lasara said, her voice shaking. We are bonded. The Empress stepped forward. Her face was unreadable, but something in her eyes had changed. She looked at the human who had survived her trial, won her daughter's heart, and bound himself to their empire voluntarily. You have earned your place, she said finally. Earth will be protected for 100 years. No Velthrani shall harvest from that world during that time. She paused. You have proven yourself more than livestock, Park Junho of Earth. Perhaps you have proven that we judged your entire species too quickly. It was not an apology. It was not friendship. But it was respect, and from the Empress of the Velthrani. That was more than anyone could have expected. That night, Junho and Lysara stood together on a balcony overlooking the arena where he had nearly died. The stars stretched out above them, vast and beautiful and full of possibility. I can feel your emotions now, Lysara said. You are happy but also sad. You miss your home. I do. I miss my daughter. I miss my world. But I made a choice, and I do not regret it. He took her hand again, and this time the touch felt natural, familiar. Besides, I am not alone. I have you. For as long as you live, she promised. And beyond, if I can find a way. They stood together in comfortable silence, two beings from different worlds who had found something unexpected in each other. Something that felt like hope. Neither of them knew that the peace they had won was about to be challenged. Across the empire, forces were moving. Lords and nobles who saw the human survival as an insult, who saw the protection of Earth as weakness, who were already planning to tear apart everything Junho had fought for. The war was not over. It was just beginning. End of part 5. I want this human. Mother. The alien vampire princess chose the warrior. Part 6. The message arrived 3 weeks after the Covenant ceremony. It came not through official channels, but broadcast openly across the empire. A deliberate insult designed to humiliate the Empress and challenge her authority. Lord Malsith, one of the oldest and most powerful nobles in the Velthrani Empire, had made his move. Junho watched the message alongside Lysara in their private quarters. Malsith appeared on the screen, an ancient Velthrani whose face was mapped with scars from thousands of years of conquest. His voice dripped with contempt. The Empress has grown weak, Malsith declared. She allows her daughter to bond with livestock. She protects a primitive world that should rightfully be harvested. The laws of our ancestors are clear. Earth belongs to the Empire. I invoke the ancient right of challenge. I bring my fleet to claim what is ours. The message ended. Lysara's face had gone pale. He cannot do this, she said, her voice tight with anger. The Covenant is sacred. The Empress's decree is law. He just did, Junho replied quietly. And from what I understand of your empire's politics, there is only one way to stop him. Lysara shook her head. No, I will not let you. The ancient right of challenge requires that the challenged party answer personally or forfeit the claim. Your mother cannot fight him. You cannot fight him. But I can. Junho stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, Earth was waiting. His daughter was waiting. Billions of people who had no idea their fate hung in the balance. Malsith is a warrior who has fought for 3,000 years. He has killed more enemies than you can imagine. This is not like the trial. This is not about survival. This is single combat against one of the deadliest beings in the galaxy. I know what it is. Junho turned to face her. And I know what happens if I do nothing. Malsith takes his fleet to Earth. He harvests my people while I hide here, safe and protected. What kind of man would that make me? What would my survival be worth if I bought it with 8 billion lives? Through their bond, Lysara could feel his resolve. It was absolute, unshakable. The same fire that had carried him through the trial was burning now, brighter than ever. Then I will fight beside you, she said. You cannot. The challenge is to me specifically. But you can do something else. You can be there. You can remind me what I am fighting for. The confrontation took place in orbit above Earth. Malsith's fleet had arrived 3 days earlier, positioning itself between the planet and the sun like a wall of darkness. The Empress's fleet stood opposite, neither side willing to fire the first shot. Everything depended on what happened next. Junho's small craft approached Malseth's flagship alone. He had refused any weapons, any advantages. The ancient laws were clear. The challenge would be answered with honor or not at all. The duel took place in the observation deck of Malseth's vessel, a vast chamber with transparent walls that showed Earth hanging in space below. The planet looked so peaceful from here, so fragile, so unaware of how close it had come to destruction. Malseth stood waiting, dressed in ceremonial armor that probably weighed more than Junho did. In his hand, he held a blade that had taken more lives than Junho could count. "I expected more," Malseth said, circling the human slowly. "The creature who conquered the trial of Crimson. The being who stole a princess's heart. You are smaller than I imagined." "Funny. I was thinking the same thing about you." Malseth's eyes narrowed. Then he attacked. The first blow nearly ended everything. Junho dodged, but Malseth was faster than anything he had faced in the trial. The blade caught his side, drawing blood. The second blow knocked him across the room. The third sent him crashing against the transparent wall so hard he felt something crack. Through their bond, Lasara felt every impact. She stood on the Empress's flagship, surrounded by crew members who watched in horrified silence. And she experienced her bonded human being torn apart. "This is over," Malseth said, standing over Junho's broken body. "You fought well for an animal. But flesh cannot defeat steel. Will cannot defeat power. Your world will be harvested, and your bones will be forgotten." Junho looked up at the ancient warrior. He looked past him, at Earth hanging in the darkness. He thought about his daughter, who would never know her father had died trying to protect her. He thought about all the children on that blue world, looking up at the stars and dreaming of wonders. And then he did something insane. He grabbed Malseth's ankle and pulled himself up, wrapping his arms around the warrior's legs. Malseth stumbled, surprised by the sudden weight. In that moment of imbalance, Junho reached for the emergency console on the wall and triggered the ship's reactor override. "What are you doing?" Malseth demanded. "What humans do," Junho said through broken teeth. "We find a way." The reactor began to overload. Alarms screamed throughout the ship. Malseth tried to break free, but Junho held on with strength that should have been impossible for his damaged body. The Velthrani's escape options were being eliminated one by one. "You will die too, you fool. I know." Junho looked at the Lord, who had threatened everything he loved. "But I will die knowing my world is safe. I will die knowing my daughter will grow up under free skies. Some things are worth that price." He sent one final message through the bond to Lysara. Not words, exactly. Just feelings. Love. Gratitude, acceptance, peace. On the Empress's flagship, Lysara collapsed to her knees. She could feel him slipping away. She could feel the fire that had burned so bright beginning to fade. And she refused to let it happen. The covenant bond was meant to share emotions, to create connection. But in that moment, Lysara pushed it further than any Velthrani had ever attempted. She reached across the void of space and poured her own life, essence, into her human. Energy flowed through the bond like a river of light. Lysara's essence, ancient and powerful, merged with Junho's fading spark and reignited it into a blaze. On Malseth's ship, the human who should have been dying suddenly opened his eyes. The reactor exploded. The flagship tore itself apart. And in the last instant before destruction, Junho felt himself wrapped in something warm and golden, carried through the fire like a leaf on the wind. He woke up on the Empress's flagship, lying on the floor with Lysara cradled in his arms. She was weak, paler than he had ever seen her, but alive. They were both alive. "You saved me," he whispered. "You saved everyone," she whispered back. It seemed fair. The aftermath was swift. With Malsith gone, his faction collapsed. The Empress formally declared humanity a protected species, not merely postponed for harvest, but recognized as beings with rights under imperial law. Any Velthrani who wished could study humans, trade with them, even live among them. But hunting was forbidden forever. 1 month later, Junho stood in the same observation deck where he had nearly died. Looking down at Earth, the planet was whole, unharmed. His people would never know how close they had come. And that was okay. Some burdens were not meant to be shared. Lesara stood beside him, her strength fully recovered. Through their bond, he felt her contentment, her pride, her love. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Leaving your world? Binding yourself to me? To this strange life among the stars?" Junho thought about the question carefully. He thought about his daughter, who was being cared for by his sister until he could find a way to visit safely. He thought about the life he had left behind and the life he had gained. "I regret nothing," he said finally. "I came out here to die protecting my people. Instead, I found you. I found purpose. I found a galaxy full of wonders and horrors and possibilities I never imagined." He took her hand, feeling the familiar coolness of her skin. "I would do it all again. Every moment. Every choice. Every scar." Lesara leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. "My mother is still not entirely comfortable with you. I know. I think she secretly respects me, but she hates admitting it. The nobles whisper about us. The human who seduced a princess. The livestock who rose above his station. Let them whisper. Words have never hurt me." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching Earth turn slowly below them. Somewhere on that blue world, children were looking up at the stars and dreaming of the future. They would grow up to explore the galaxy, to meet the Velthrani not as prey, but as equals. They would carry humanity's fire to distant worlds, all because one ordinary soldier refused to give up, refused to kneel, refused to let fear determine his choices. "You know," Junho said softly, "when I was a boy, my mother told me that the stars were watching us, that they were waiting to see what we would do with our little corner of the universe. I never believed her until now. And what do you think the stars see when they look at humanity?" Junho smiled, thinking about everything his species had accomplished and everything they had yet to become. The wars they had survived, the art they had created, the way they kept reaching for impossible dreams. They see a species that refuses to quit, that carries fire in their hearts, that looks at the darkness and chooses to shine. He squeezed Lesara's hand. They see us becoming something greater than we ever imagined. The stars continued their ancient dance. And somewhere in that vast cosmic tapestry, a human warrior and an alien princess wrote a new chapter in the story of the universe. A story of courage, of love, of two worlds learning to see each other not as predator and prey, but as partners, the beginning of something wonderful.